The dust had barely settled from the noon stage when Delilah Reed felt the cold shadow fall across her father's mercantile counter, and she knew without looking up that Charles Whitmore had come to collect what her dead father could no longer pay. It was the summer of 1883 in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and the heat pressed down on the small frontier town like a hand squeezing water from a rag. Delilah had been running the mercantile alone for 3 weeks now, ever since consumption had taken her father in the night, leaving her with nothing but debt and the fading smell of his pipe tobacco. She was 22 years old, and every morning she woke up wondering if this would be the day Whitmore would take everything. "Miss Reed." His voice was smooth as snake oil and twice as poisonous. "I believe we have business to discuss." Delilah straightened her spine and met his gaze. Charles Whitmore was the kind of man who wore his wealth like armor, his suit immaculate despite the Oklahoma heat, his fingers heavy with gold rings that had probably been pried from the hands of desperate people just like her. He was not a tall man, but he had the presence of someone who knew he held all the cards. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, keeping her voice steady, "I told you last week I need more time. The store is doing well, but I cannot pay the full amount until when?" He interrupted, stepping closer to the counter. "Your father borrowed $500 from my bank 2 years ago. With interest, that debt now stands at $750. I have been patient, Miss Reed, more patient than most would be, but my patience has limits." "I understand that, but no buts." He placed both hands on the counter, leaning forward. Behind him, 2 of his men had entered the store, their presence a silent threat. "You have until the end of the week, Friday. If you cannot pay, I will seize this property and everything in it." Delilah felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Friday was 4 days away. She had maybe $200 saved, if that. There was no way she could come up with the rest in time. "Please, Mr. Whitmore, this store is all I have. My father built it from nothing." "If you just give me another month, Whitmore laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I have heard that before. From your father, in fact, right before he died and left you holding his debts. No, Miss Reed, Friday, or you will find yourself on the street." He turned to leave, his men following like trained dogs. Delilah gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to rage against the unfairness of it all. But she was alone, and screaming would not change anything. The bell above the door chimed as Whitmore and his men stepped outside. Delilah sank onto the stool behind the counter, dropping her face into her hands. 4 days. She had 4 days to find a miracle or lose everything. The afternoon passed in a blur. Customers came and went, buying flour and coffee and nails, but Delilah barely registered them. Her mind was spinning through possibilities, each one more impossible than the last. She could try to borrow money from someone in town, but who? Everyone knew about her father's debts. She could sell some of the store's inventory, but that would only bring in maybe another $50 at most. The bell chimed again, and Delilah looked up to see a man she did not recognize standing in the doorway. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of long days in the saddle. His hat was dusty, his boots worn, and there was a Colt revolver strapped to his hip. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were a startling blue, like the sky after a storm, and they held a kind of quiet strength that made her sit up straighter. "Help you?" she asked, trying to sound more composed than she felt. The man removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Yes, madam." "Name is Asher Wright. I am looking for work, and I heard in the saloon that your father passed recently. Thought you might need someone to help around the store." Delilah blinked. Of all the things she had expected, this was not one of them. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Wright, but I cannot afford to hire anyone right now. I am not asking for much, he said, stepping closer. Just room and board and maybe a little pay when you can manage it. I am good with my hands, can fix things, move heavy loads, deal with difficult customers. And I know you have had some trouble with the banker. She stiffened. How do you know about that? Small town, he said simply. People talk. And I was outside when Whitmore left. I saw the look on his face. That is a man who enjoys other people's suffering. There was something in his voice, an edge of anger that surprised her. Delilah studied him more carefully. He could not have been much older than she was, maybe 26 or 27. His face was weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw and a scar that ran along his left temple, disappearing into his hairline. He looked like a man who had seen trouble and come out the other side. Where are you from, Mr. Wright? Texas, originally. But I have been drifting for a few years now. Working ranches, riding guard on cattle drives, doing whatever needs doing. I am tired of drifting, though, looking for a place to settle, at least for a while. Delilah chewed her lower lip. She could use the help, that much was true. The store was too much for one person, especially with her trying to figure out how to save it from Whitmore. But trusting a stranger felt dangerous, particularly now when everything was so precarious. As if reading her thoughts, Asher said, I understand if you are wary. But I give you my word, Miss Reed, I am not here to cause trouble, just looking for honest work. There was something in his eyes, a sincerity that made her want to believe him. And really, what choice did she have? She needed help, even if she could not pay for it properly. All right, she said finally. There is a small room in the back with a cot. It is not much, but it is clean. I can feed you and I will pay you what I can when I can. Does that work? A smile spread across his face, transforming it entirely. That works just fine, madam. Thank you. You will not regret this. Delilah hoped he was right. Asher proved himself useful almost immediately. He spent the rest of that day fixing a broken shelf that Delilah had been meaning to repair for weeks, reorganizing the storeroom so everything was easier to find, and helping an elderly woman carry her purchases back to her house, 3 streets over. By the time evening fell and Delilah locked the front door, she felt more hopeful than she had in days. They ate a simple dinner of beans and cornbread at the small table in the back room. Asher ate with the efficient hunger of someone who had missed too many meals, and Delilah found herself wondering what had brought him to Stillwater. There was a story there, she could sense it, but she did not want to pry. So what exactly does Whitmore want? Asher asked, pushing his empty plate away. If you do not mind me asking, Delilah sighed. My father borrowed money from his bank to keep the store running during a bad year. He thought he could pay it back, but then the interest kept piling up and then he got sick. And now... She trailed off, staring at her hands. Now Whitmore says I owe him $750 by Friday or he takes the store. Asher whistled low. That is a lot of money. I know. I have about 200 saved. I have been trying to think of ways to get the rest, but there is no time. She looked up at him. Why do you care, Mr. Wright? You just got here. Call me Asher, he said. And I care because I have seen men like Whitmore before, men who use their power to crush people who cannot fight back. It is not right. There was that edge of anger again, sharper this time. Delilah wondered who had hurt him, what had happened to put that fire in his voice. Well, right or not, I do not see a way out of this, she admitted. Unless I can rob a bank in the next 4 days, I am finished. Asher was quiet for a moment, his blue eyes thoughtful. Then he said, Do not give up yet. Sometimes solutions come from unexpected places. It was not much comfort, but it was something. Delilah nodded, and they cleared the dishes together in companionable silence. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and worry. Asher continued to prove invaluable, taking on tasks Delilah had not even known needed doing. He repaired the front door so it did not stick, replaced a broken window pane, and even convinced a few customers to buy more than they had planned. He had an easy way about him, a quiet confidence that people seemed to respond to. But despite his help, the clock was ticking. By Thursday evening, Delilah had managed to scrape together another $50 from increased sales, bringing her total to $250. It was not nearly enough, and she could feel panic beginning to set in. She was closing up the store when Asher came in from the storeroom, his expression serious. "I have an idea," he said, "but you might not like it. At this point, I am willing to hear anything." "I have some money saved," he said. "Not much, but maybe $100. You could use it toward the debt." Delilah stared at him. "I could not possibly accept that. You just got here and you have already done so much. I will not take your savings too." "It is not charity," Asher said. "Consider it an investment. If you lose the store, I am out of a job anyway. This way we both have a chance." "But it is still not enough," Delilah pointed out. "Even with your 100, I would only have 350. I still need 400 more." Asher nodded slowly. "I know. But it is a start. And maybe if you can show Whitmore you are making an effort, he will give you more time." Delilah wanted to laugh at that. Men like Whitmore did not give people more time. They took what they wanted and left the rest to rot. But she appreciated Asher's optimism, even if it was misplaced. "I will think about it," she said finally. "Thank you, Asher. Really." He nodded, and for a moment their eyes met and held. Delilah felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the Oklahoma heat. She looked away quickly, suddenly flustered. "I should finish closing up," she said, her voice coming out more breathless than she intended. "Let me help," Asher replied, and together they went through the evening routine, their movements synchronized in a way that felt both comfortable and unsettling. Friday dawned hot and cloudless, the sun already fierce by the time Delilah opened the store at 7. Her stomach was twisted in knots, and she had barely slept the night before. Whitmore would be here soon, she knew, and when he came she would have to face the fact that she had failed. Asher found her standing behind the counter, staring at nothing. "You all right?" he asked gently. "No," she said honestly, "but I will be, somehow." He moved closer, and she could smell leather and soap and something distinctly him. "Delilah," he said, using her first name for the first time. "Whatever happens today, you are not alone, you understand that." She looked up at him, surprised by the intensity in his eyes. "You have known me for less than a week. Why do you care so much?" Asher hesitated, then reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle, so intimate that Delilah felt her breath catch. "Because in this past week, I have seen more kindness and strength in you than I have seen in most people in my entire life. Because you gave me a chance when you had every reason not to, and because—" He paused, swallowing hard. "Because I think I am starting to care about you more than I should." Delilah's heart was racing now, her skin tingling where his fingers had brushed against her cheek. "Asher." But before she could say anything else, the door burst open with a bang that made them both jump. Whitmore strode in, flanked by 4 of his men this time instead of 2. His expression was triumphant, like a cat that had finally cornered a mouse. "Miss Reed," he said, his voice dripping with false pleasantry. "Today is the day. Do you have my money?" Delilah felt Asher tense beside her, but she stepped forward, keeping her voice steady. "Mr. Whitmore, I have $350. I know that is not the full amount, but if you would just give me a little more time, 350. Whitmore laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "That is not even half of what you owe." "No, Miss Reed." Our arrangement was clear. Full payment by today or I take the store, and since you cannot pay—" He gestured to his men. "Start clearing out the inventory. We will sell it to cover part of the debt." "Wait," Delilah cried, panic surging through her. "Please, you cannot do this. This is my home, my livelihood, everything I have." "Should have thought of that before you failed to pay your debts," Whitmore said coldly. He nodded to his men again, and they began moving toward the shelves. That was when Asher stepped around the counter, placing himself between Whitmore's men and the store inventory. His hand rested casually on the butt of his revolver, and his blue eyes had gone hard as flint. "I do not think so," he said quietly. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. "Who the hell are you?" "Name is Asher Wright, and I am telling you that you are not taking anything from this store." "Is that so?" Whitmore's lip curled. "And what exactly are you going to do about it, Cowboy? There are 5 of us and 1 of you." "I count just fine," Asher replied, "but numbers do not always matter. What matters is whether you are willing to die for a debt that probably is not even legal in the first place." Whitmore's face flushed red. "Not legal. I have the paperwork right here, paperwork that I am guessing shows interest rates far above what Oklahoma law allows," Asher interrupted. "Paperwork that would not hold up if anyone actually looked at it closely. Men like you prey on people who do not know their rights, who are too scared or too desperate to fight back. But I am not scared, Whitmore, and I am not going to let you steal from someone who does not deserve it." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Whitmore's men had their hands on their guns, and Delilah could see the calculation in Whitmore's eyes. He was weighing whether this was worth a gunfight. Finally, he sneered. "You are making a mistake, Cowboy. I own half this town. The sheriff is in my pocket. You think you can stand against me?" "I think you are a bully and a coward," Asher said flatly. "And I think you are going to turn around and walk out of here, and you are going to give Miss Reed a proper extension on her debt with reasonable terms. Or I am going to make sure everyone in Stillwater knows exactly what kind of man you really are." Whitmore laughed, but it sounded forced. "And who is going to believe a drifter over me?" "Why do you not test that theory?" Asher suggested. "I am sure the territorial judge would be very interested to hear about your business practices. And I happen to know that Judge Morrison has no love for corrupt bankers." That hit home. Delilah saw the flicker of uncertainty in Whitmore's eyes. Morrison was known for being incorruptible, and he made regular circuits through Oklahoma territory. If Asher could get the judge's attention. "You are bluffing," Whitmore said, but he sounded less certain now. "Try me," Asher replied. For a long moment no one moved. Delilah held her breath, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Then Whitmore made a sharp gesture to his men. "We are leaving," he snapped. "But this is not over, Miss Reed. Not by a long shot." He turned on his heel and stalked toward the door, his men following. But at the threshold he paused and looked back at Asher. "You just made yourself an enemy, Cowboy. That was foolish." "I've had worse enemies than you," Asher said, "and I am still standing." Whitmore left, slamming the door behind him hard enough to make the windows rattle. The moment he was gone, Delilah felt her knees go weak. She grabbed the counter for support, her whole body trembling. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I thought there was going to be a shootout. I thought then Asher was there, his arms around her, pulling her against his chest." "It is all right," he murmured into her hair. "You are safe, I promise." Delilah clung to him, burying her face in his shirt. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and feel the solid warmth of him. He smelled like leather and sunshine, and for the first time in weeks she felt like maybe everything would be okay. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice muffled. "You could have been killed." "Because you are under my protection now," Asher said simply. "And I do not let people hurt those I care about." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. His face was so close to hers that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, the way his jaw was still clenched with residual tension. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he replied. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she had not realized had fallen. "I know you are brave and kind and stronger than you think. I know that you deserve better than what life has given you. And I know that these past few days with you have meant more to me than the last few years of drifting." Delilah felt something break open inside her, all the walls she had built around her heart crumbling in an instant. "Asher." He kissed her then, slow and gentle, a question and an answer all at once. Delilah melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and she felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, her whole world narrowing down to this moment, this man, this feeling of finally being seen. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Asher rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have. Do not you dare apologize," Delilah interrupted. That was exactly what I needed." He smiled then, a real smile that lit up his whole face. Yeah, she confirmed and kissed him again just to prove it. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped up in each other, the store and the debt and everything else fading into the background. But eventually, reality reasserted itself, and Delilah reluctantly pulled away. "We still have a problem," she pointed out. "Whitmore might have backed down today, but he will come back, and next time he might not come alone." "Then we need to make sure there is not a next time," Asher said. He was back to being serious now, his tactical mind clearly working. "You said he showed you paperwork. Do you still have it?" "Yes, it is in my father's desk." "Let me see it." They moved to the small office in the back, and Delilah pulled out the loan documents. Asher studied them carefully, his brow furrowed. After a few minutes he let out a low whistle. "Just as I thought. This interest rate is illegal. Oklahoma law caps interest at 10% per year. Whitmore has been charging you nearly 20. If we can prove that, the debt becomes void." Hope flared in Delilah's chest. "Are you sure?" "Positive. I learned a bit about territorial law during my time in Texas. Had to deal with my share of crooked lenders." There was a shadow in his eyes, old pain that he pushed away quickly. "We need to get this to Judge Morrison. When is he next due in Stillwater?" "Not for another month," Delilah said, her hope deflating slightly. "Then we will have to go to him. He is in Guthrie right now, about a day's ride from here. If we leave first thing tomorrow, we can be back by Sunday." "We," Delilah repeated. "You do not think I am going to let you ride across Oklahoma territory alone, do you?" Asher said, one corner of his mouth quirking up. "Besides, Whitmore might try something if you are here by yourself. Better if we both go." Delilah nodded slowly. It made sense, even if the thought of closing the store for 2 days made her nervous. But what choice did she have? This might be her only chance to be free of Whitmore's hold. "All right," she agreed. "We leave at dawn." They spent the rest of the day preparing for the trip and taking care of the store's business. Delilah put a sign in the window saying she would be closed until Monday, and Asher checked over their supplies and horses. He had a sturdy roan gelding that he had ridden into town, and Delilah's father's old bay mare was still in the small stable behind the store. That night, as they ate a simple dinner, Delilah found herself studying Asher across the table. She still knew so little about him, really. But somehow that did not matter as much as it probably should have. He had stood up for her when no one else would. He had risked his life to protect her. And when he kissed her, she had felt something shift inside her, like a door opening onto possibilities she had not dared to imagine. "What are you thinking about?" Asher asked, catching her staring. Delilah felt her cheeks heat. "You, us," this whole situation. A week ago, I did not even know you existed. Now you are riding across the territory to help me save my store. It is a lot to take in. Regret it?" He asked, his voice carefully neutral. "No," she said immediately. "Not for a second. I wish I knew more about you, where you came from, what made you the man you are." Asher was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the wooden table. Then he said, "My family had a ranch in Texas. Not a big one, but it was ours. My father built it from nothing, just like your father built this store. When I was 23, a banker named Sullivan started calling in debts all over the county. My father owed him money, same as half the other ranchers. Sullivan did not care that there had been a drought, that the cattle prices had dropped. He wanted his money, and he wanted it now." Delilah's heart clenched. She could already guess where this story was going. "My father tried to negotiate," Asher continued, his voice flat and emotionless in a way that told her how much it cost him to talk about this. "But Sullivan would not budge. So one night, my father rode into town to try one more time. He never came back. They found him the next morning, shot in an alley behind the bank. The sheriff ruled it a robbery, but everyone knew the truth. Sullivan had him killed." "Oh, Asher," Delilah whispered, reaching across the table to take his hand. "My mother died 6 months later. Grief, the doctor said, but I knew it was a broken heart. I tried to keep the ranch going, but without my father, I could not manage it alone. Sullivan foreclosed and I lost everything. That is when I started drifting. I told myself I just needed to get away, to start fresh somewhere. But really, I was running from the pain, from the guilt of not being able to save my family." He looked up at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her chest ache. "When I saw Whitmore threaten you, it was like I was back there again. Watching my father try to stand up to a bully with all the power. And I knew I could not let it happen again. I could not let another good person lose everything because of a man like that." Delilah squeezed his hand tighter. "You did not fail your family, Asher. What happened was not your fault." "Maybe not," he said. "But I failed to stop it. I was too young, too powerless. This time I have the chance to make a difference, to protect someone who deserves protecting, and I will not waste that chance." They sat there in the quiet of the back room, hands clasped across the table, and Delilah felt the last of her reservations melt away. This man had suffered and survived. He had lost everything and kept going. And now he was offering her not just his help, but his heart. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "And thank you for being here, for caring." "Thank you for giving me a reason to care again," Asher replied. They went to bed separately that night, Asher in his small room off the storeroom and Delilah in her quarters upstairs. But Delilah lay awake for hours, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that might happen. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped thinking of Asher as a hired hand or even just a helper. He had become something more, something essential. Dawn came early, the sky barely lightening to gray when Asher knocked on her door. They dressed quickly, ate a hurried breakfast, and saddled the horses. Delilah locked up the store with a feeling of trepidation, hoping that when she returned, it would still be hers. The ride to Guthrie was long and hot. They followed the main road north, stopping occasionally to water the horses and rest in what little shade they could find. Oklahoma in August was brutal, the sun beating down relentlessly, turning the landscape into shades of gold and brown. But Delilah found she did not mind the discomfort as much as she thought she would. There was something freeing about being on the road, away from the store and the town and all her worries. And having Asher beside her made everything feel like an adventure rather than a burden. They talked as they rode, sharing stories and small details about their lives. Asher told her about his time working cattle drives, about sleeping under the stars and the camaraderie of the trail. Delilah told him about growing up in the mercantile, about helping her father with inventory and learning to read the ledgers before she could read storybooks. "He sounds like he was a good man," Asher said. "He was," Delilah agreed. "He worked so hard to give me a good life. I just wish I could have saved him, saved the store for him." "You are saving it now," Asher pointed out, "and I think he would be proud of you, of how strong you have been." The words warmed her more than the sun ever could. They reached Guthrie just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was a bigger town than Stillwater, with brick buildings and proper boardwalks, and the kind of bustle that came with being the territorial capital. Asher found them a respectable boarding house, and they got 2 separate rooms despite the curious look from the landlady. "We will find the judge first thing tomorrow," Asher said as they stood in the hallway between their rooms. "Get this sorted out once and for all." "And then what?" Delilah asked. She was suddenly acutely aware of how close they were standing, of the way his eyes seemed to hold her in place. "Then we go back to Stillwater," Asher said, "and we figure out what comes next, together." The word "together" sent a thrill through her. "I would like that." He leaned down and kissed her, gentle and sweet, a promise of more to come. When he pulled back, he was smiling. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we end this." Delilah went to her room feeling lighter than she had in months. She washed up with the basin water, changed into her nightgown, and crawled into the narrow bed. Sleep came easily for the first time in weeks. Morning brought renewed determination. They dressed carefully, Delilah in her best dress and Asher in his cleanest shirt and vest, and made their way to the courthouse. Judge Morrison's office was on the 2nd floor, and his secretary was a severe-looking woman with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. "We need to see Judge Morrison," Asher said politely. "It is a matter of some urgency." "The judge is very busy," the secretary replied. "What is this regarding?" "Illegal banking practices in Stillwater," Asher said, "and a man named Charles Whitmore." The secretary's eyebrows rose slightly. "Wait here." She disappeared into the inner office. 5 minutes later, she returned and gestured for them to enter. "The judge will see you." Judge Morrison was a man in his 60s, with thick white hair and a face lined by years of making difficult decisions. But his eyes were kind, and when he gestured for them to sit, Delilah felt some of her nervousness ease. "Miss Reed, Mr. Wright," he said, nodding to each of them. "My secretary says you have information about Charles Whitmore. I confess that name is not unfamiliar to me. Please, tell me what brings you here." Delilah pulled out the loan documents and passed them across the desk. As the judge read through them, his expression grew increasingly dark. 20% interest, he muttered, compounded monthly, and threats of property seizure with no grace period. He looked up at them. "How long has this been going on?" 2 years, Delilah said. "My father took out the original loan to keep the store running. He tried to pay it back, but Whitmore kept adding fees and charges. Then my father died 3 weeks ago, and Whitmore said I had to pay the full amount plus interest or lose everything. And when you could not pay, he tried to seize the property," Morrison finished, "with hired muscle to intimidate you." "Yes, sir," Asher said. "I intervened, but I suspect Whitmore will try again. That is why we came to you. Miss Reed needs legal protection, and Whitmore needs to be held accountable." Morrison leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "I have been hearing troubling reports about Mr. Whitmore for some time now. But most people are too afraid to come forward. The fact that you are willing to testify, Miss Reed, gives me grounds to investigate further." He paused, then said, "I am going to issue an immediate injunction preventing Whitmore from taking any action against you or your property while this matter is investigated." I will also be sending a marshal to Stillwater to review Whitmore's banking records. If they show what I suspect they will, Whitmore will be facing criminal charges. Relief flooded through Delilah so intensely that she felt dizzy. Thank you, Judge Morrison. Thank you so much. Do not thank me, Morrison said. You did the hard part by standing up to him. Too many people let men like Whitmore get away with their crimes because they are afraid. Your courage may well save others from the same fate. They left the courthouse an hour later with legal documents that effectively nullified Delilah's debt and protected her store. Delilah felt like she was walking on air, her heart so light she thought she might float away. We did it, she said, turning to Asher with a grin so wide it hurt her cheeks. We actually did it. Asher caught her around the waist and spun her in a circle, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he was looking at her with such open affection that it made her breath catch. You did it, he corrected. I just went along for the ride. You did so much more than that, Delilah said. You gave me the strength to fight back, to believe I could win. You always had that strength, Asher replied. You just needed someone to remind you. They were standing in the middle of the boardwalk, people flowing around them, but Delilah did not care. She reached up and pulled Asher down into a kiss, pouring all her gratitude and joy and growing love into it. He responded immediately, his arms tightening around her, holding her close. When they finally broke apart, both of them were flushed and smiling. We should probably head back, Delilah said, though she made no move to step away from him. Probably, Asher agreed. But first, there is something I want to ask you. Delilah's heart began to race. What? Asher took her hands in his expression suddenly serious. Delilah Reed, I know we have not known each other long, but these past few days with you have been the best of my life. You make me want to stop drifting. You make me want to stay in one place and build something real. So I am asking you, would you let me stay? Not just as a hired hand, but as a partner. In the store, in your life, in whatever comes next. Tears were pricking at Delilah's eyes, but they were happy tears. Yes, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Asher, I want that more than anything. He kissed her again, soft and lingering, and Delilah knew with absolute certainty that this was the start of something wonderful. They rode back to Stillwater the next day, taking their time and stopping to camp under the stars that night. Asher built a small fire, and they ate beans and hardtack and talked about their plans for the future. Delilah wanted to expand the store's inventory, maybe add some dry goods and farm equipment. Asher thought they could build a small addition out back for storage, maybe even start a side business doing carpentry work. We could make it work, Delilah said, lying on her back and looking up at the vast expanse of stars. Build something good together. We will make it work, Asher corrected. He was lying beside her close enough that their shoulders touched. I am not going anywhere, Delilah. You are stuck with me now. She turned her head to look at him, her heart swelling with emotion. I love you, Asher Wright. The words hung in the air for a moment, precious and fragile. Then Asher smiled, a slow, warm smile that lit up his entire face. I love you too, Delilah Reed, more than I thought I could love anyone. He rolled onto his side and kissed her, deep and thorough, and Delilah felt the last of her walls crumble completely. When they finally drew apart, both of them were breathing hard, and the air between them was charged with possibility. I want you, Delilah whispered, surprised by her own boldness. Is that wrong? Not even a little, Asher replied, his voice rough with desire. But I want to do this right. I want to marry you first, Delilah, make you my wife properly. Delilah's heart soared. Then let us get married as soon as we get back to Stillwater. That is a deal, Asher said, and kissed her again to seal it. They returned to Stillwater on Sunday afternoon, dusty and tired but triumphant. Word of their success had somehow preceded them, probably via the telegraph, and several townspeople came by to congratulate Delilah and welcome Asher properly to the community. 2 days later, Marshal Davies arrived from Guthrie with a warrant for Charles Whitmore. The banker was arrested on charges of usury and fraud, and his bank was placed under federal oversight pending a full investigation. Delilah heard later that they had found evidence of similar illegal practices with dozens of other borrowers. Whitmore would be facing trial and likely prison. Delilah felt no triumph at his downfall, only relief that he could not hurt anyone else the way he had hurt her family. 3 weeks after returning from Guthrie, Delilah and Asher were married in Stillwater's small church. It was a simple ceremony, attended by most of the town. Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in a trunk, and Asher wore a new suit that made him look both handsome and slightly uncomfortable. But when they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure, and Delilah felt tears of joy streaming down her face. "I promise to love you and protect you for all the days of my life," Asher said, slipping a simple gold band onto her finger. "To stand beside you through good times and bad, to be your partner, your friend, and your husband. I promise to love you and support you for all the days of my life," Delilah replied, her voice shaking with emotion. "To build a life with you, to trust you, and to choose you every single day." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Asher kissed her with such tender passion that the whole congregation erupted in cheers and applause. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. Asher and Delilah worked side by side in the mercantile, expanding it slowly but steadily. Asher built the storage addition he had talked about, and they did indeed start doing some carpentry work on the side. The extra income allowed them to pay off the store completely and start saving for the future. A year after their wedding, Delilah gave birth to a son they named Samuel Wright, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. 2 years later came a daughter, Emma, who had Asher's smile and Delilah's stubborn determination. Watching Asher with their children, seeing the gentleness and love he showed them, made Delilah fall in love with him all over again every single day. On their 5th anniversary, Asher surprised her by buying the property next to the store and building them a proper house. It was not large or fancy, but it had a wide porch and room for their growing family, and Delilah cried happy tears when he carried her over the threshold. "How did you afford this?" she asked, looking around at the bright, airy rooms. "I have been saving," Asher said with a grin, "and business has been good. I wanted to give you something permanent, something that is ours and no one can ever take away." "You already gave me that," Delilah said, touching his face. "You gave me yourself. Everything else is just extra." Life continued its steady rhythm. Samuel grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved helping his father with carpentry projects. Emma was wild and spirited, always climbing trees and getting into mischief. When Samuel was 8 and Emma was 6, they welcomed another daughter, Grace, who was sweet and gentle and adored by her older siblings. Through it all, Delilah and Asher remained deeply in love. They had their arguments, of course, their moments of frustration and disagreement. But they always came back to each other, always remembered that they were partners in everything. Sometimes, late at night when the children were asleep, they would sit on their porch and talk about everything and nothing. Delilah would lean against Asher's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, and marvel at how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" she asked one night when they were both in their 40s and their oldest child was preparing to leave for college back east. "Settling down here, giving up your drifting," Asher pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Not for one single second." You gave me everything I did not even know I was looking for. A home, a family, a purpose. I found myself when I found you." "I feel the same way," Delilah murmured. "That day you walked into the store, I was so scared, so alone, I thought I had lost everything. But really, I was about to gain everything. You saved me, Asher." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "That is what love does. It makes us stronger together than we ever could be alone." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars come out over Stillwater. The town had grown over the years, new buildings springing up, new families arriving. But the mercantile remained a fixture, now called Reid and Wright General Store, a testament to the partnership that had built it. When Samuel graduated from college and returned to Stillwater with a degree in business, he took over managing the store's finances and helped them expand even further. Emma married a local rancher and gave Delilah and Asher their first grandchildren, twin boys who were as wild and spirited as their mother. Grace became a teacher, educating the children of Stillwater in the same one-room schoolhouse where she had learned to read and write. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. There were children and grandchildren running everywhere, laughter and chaos, and so much love that Delilah felt her heart might burst from the fullness of it all. Asher found her in the kitchen, taking a moment to herself, and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Wright." "Happy anniversary, Mr. Wright," she replied, leaning back against him. "Can you believe it has been 25 years?" "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," Asher said. "Other times it feels like I have loved you my entire life." Delilah turned in his arms to face him. They were both older now, lines around their eyes and gray threading through their hair. But when she looked at Asher, she still saw the young cowboy who had walked into her store and changed her life forever. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every time." "And I would choose you," Asher replied, kissing her softly. "Every single time." Outside, they could hear their family laughing and talking, the sound of children playing and the clink of glasses being raised in toasts. It was the sound of a life well lived, of love that had grown and deepened over decades, of two people who had taken a chance on each other and built something beautiful from it. Years continued to pass. Delilah and Asher grew older together. Their children had children, and their legacy spread through Stillwater like roots from a strong tree. The store remained successful, passed down eventually to Samuel and his wife, who ran it with the same care and dedication that Delilah and Asher had shown. When Asher was 68, he had a health scare that reminded them both that their time together was precious and finite. But he recovered, and they made a point to treasure every day, every moment, every ordinary blessing of their shared life. On a warm spring evening, when Delilah was 70 and Asher was 73, they sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. Their great-grandchildren were playing in the yard, and the sound of their laughter floated on the breeze. "We did good, didn't we?" Delilah said, taking Asher's weathered hand in hers. "We did better than good," Asher replied. "We built something real, something that will last long after we are gone." "I love you," Delilah said. "I have loved you from that first moment you stood up to Whitmore. From that first moment, you said I was under your protection. And I have loved you from the moment you gave a drifter a chance," Asher said. "You saw something in me worth believing in. You made me want to be better, to do better." They sat together as the sun set, painting the Oklahoma sky in shades of gold and rose and purple. The years had been kind to them, full of joy and laughter and the deep, abiding love that comes from choosing the same person every day for a lifetime. When they eventually went inside, Asher held the door for Delilah, and she paused to kiss his cheek. Their family was there, spread throughout the house they had built together, and the sound of conversation and love filled every corner. That night, lying in bed with Asher's arm around her and his steady breathing in her ear, Delilah thought about the frightened young woman she had been all those years ago. The woman who had been cornered by a banker and had thought she had lost everything. If she could go back and tell that woman that everything would be all right, that a cowboy would walk into her life and become her whole world, would she have believed it? Probably not. But it would not have mattered. The journey had been worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Because it had led her here to this life, to this man, to this perfect, ordinary, extraordinary happiness. Delilah drifted off to sleep with a smile on her face, secure in the knowledge that she was loved and had loved well. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered. The years stretched on, and Delilah and Asher remained inseparable until the very end. They grew old together gracefully, their love never dimming but rather deepening with each passing season. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren were a testament to the partnership they had forged in those early, uncertain days. On the day Delilah turned 82, surrounded by 4 generations of family in the house Asher had built for her so many years ago, she looked around at all the faces she loved and felt nothing but gratitude. Asher, now 85 and moving slower but still sharp as ever, raised his glass in a toast. "To my beautiful wife," he said, his voice still strong despite his years, "who took a chance on a drifter and made him the luckiest man alive. I love you, Delilah Reed Wright, today, tomorrow, and always." "I love you too," Delilah replied, her eyes shining, "forever and always." And as their family erupted in cheers and applause, just as they had on their wedding day so many decades ago, Delilah and Asher shared a smile that held a lifetime of memories, a lifetime of love, and the promise that their story would continue in the lives of all those they had touched. It was a good life, a full life, a life worth living, and they had lived it together from that first moment when a cowboy had stepped forward and said 5 simple words that changed everything. "She's under my protection." Those words had been the beginning of their story. But the love that grew from them, the family they built, the legacy they left, that was the real story. And it was a story that would be told for generations to come in Stillwater, Oklahoma. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single act of courage, and that true love is worth fighting for.